Listen, you're not going to get paid more if you're Superman. You're going to get paid more if your business is, set up for success.
You want to talk about stopping continuity really quickly? Go through a good conversation with somebody, then all of a sudden they bring you something that your face blushes and puts you back in your seat. You lost all leverage. If you cost yourself $500,000 on a 10 times multiplier, you just cost yourself $5 million because of an issue that could have been averted or could have been saved.
Welcome back to the Legacy Advisors podcast. I'm Kris Jones, here with my co-host,
Ed Button.
Junior.
And
today we've got something a little different for you. It's an inside look at what it really takes to maximize your exit. We're going to walk you through the M&A Checklist. It's a tactical guide with 20 moves you need to make if you want a premium valuation, avoid getting crushed in diligence, and you want to walk away from a deal feeling like a winner. Whether you're thinking about selling in 12 weeks or 12 months, this checklist will change the way you run your business starting today. So let's jump into segment 1, building your financial foundation. And by the way, today's podcast, the M&A Checklist, is available in its entirety for download on our website, legacyadvisors.io. So building your financial foundation, here are some of the key points that, Ed, we're going to cover in this section. And we're going to move a little bit quicker than some of the other podcasts because we have a lot to cover. So first, pay yourself a market salary. Stop commingling expenses. Drive up your EBITDA. Valuation grows with profitability. Button up your books. Adopt GAAP and clean accounting. Address skeletons, which we've talked about in previous episodes. Disclose those, identify them and disclose them, those issues early. And then finally, create several years of forward-looking financial projections. So my first question for you is, why is paying yourself a market salary important?
Super important. Primarily is people don't want to come into a business and see, and it could be market higher or lower, come in and see, oh, this business is profitable because the person making all the decisions or running the business is taking peanuts. And they're just leaving it in the business. And it depends on how the company's structured. We talked in prior episodes about founder importance and how dependent is the business on a founder. So if you're in a business that you might be the founder, but you're outside of the business, that's not really a huge issue. But if you're in the business and you are the founder and you are the CEO at the time, they're going to have to replace you. I know we talk about founder dependency and how it works, but they're still going to need to replace you, somebody to be strategic about it. So if round numbers say you're taking $250,000 a year in a role that should be making $500,000 a year, now you just cost yourself a $250,000 change in your financial when they go through valuations and when they go through their pro forma and plan out how much they can invest in this business to hit their return on investment, to hit their cash flows required to service, whether if they're taking debt or to service, whether if they're taking investor capital to do it or if they're using company capital. They like you said, it's a very calculated process from a strategic buyer, from a financial buyer's perspective. And when you're going through making sure you're paying market higher or lower, doesn't matter. Try and true it up. Try and make it as normal as possible. Try and make your business look as everybody would expect to see it. And making it how you want it to be seen is really going to show through your financials. Kris, question to you is, how detailed, when you're going through forecasts and you talk about a 12, 24 month forecast, how detailed do those forecasts need to be? Blocky, super detailed? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it should include three things. It should include a profit and loss statement, and you should have, what's interesting is that you come from more of the traditional sort of space and I come from more of the tech space. And so you tend to look at, say, 3 to 5 years or so of history. And Again, in the tech space, 2 to 3 years is a lot, just because, if what you've built is super innovative and takes off, you don't need 10 to 20 years for that to happen. You've probably already IPO'd by then. But anyway, so you need, a P&L should capture all of the income and expenses of the business. You should have your balance sheet where any of the debts, the equity, among other things, are on there and transparent. And then your cash flow statement, which is for the most part an internal, not necessarily for M&A, but an internal document that helps you make decisions about your cash needs and your cash availability for growing the business. And one real quick thing before I move on to the next question for you is on the salary piece. I mean, listen, you need to pay yourself at the higher end, in my opinion, of the market rate, because that's what a buyer expects. They expect your company to be healthy enough for you to pay yourself that. And I'll just share a really quick story. When I sold my first company, I candidly didn't know exactly what I was making, but my controller told me, Kris, and this goes back 20 years, Kris, you're making about $350,000 a year. Now, I was running a pretty big business at that time, but it helped facilitate the negotiation around my employment contract. If I was paying myself $25,000 or $50,000 or just bare peanuts or commingling or doing some other stuff we're going to address later, you're in a position of weakness. Go ahead and try to talk me down from a pretty impressive number versus putting me in the position where I have to talk myself up to an acceptable number. So for you, real quick, I know in a previous episode we talked about, you kind of seemed to take an interest in my use of the word skeletons. And specifically what I mean is everyone that runs a business has run into issues, whether it be getting sued unexpectedly, whether it be an employee issue or dispute that is unresolved, that led to a bunch of Glassdoor, negative Glassdoor reviews. There's just so much. The skeletons are basically the warts. They're the part of your business that everybody has. But how about a quick answer? Why is it important to identify and resolve these really before you have to disclose them?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you want to always address skeletons as much as you can, as quick as you can throughout your business, day in, day out. Now, there is going to be skeletons that come out that you might not know about. So typically, what I would want to do through this process is take some of my own time and do my own self-searching with me and my team that I'm working with or within the company and say, what are we missing? Is there any issues that we don't know about? Let's start talking to employees. Let's start talking to, obviously we're not talking to them about the exit. Obviously that wouldn't be smart, but talking to them about pain points, because there might be things happening at different levels that might never have got to you. It could be people are maybe working too many hours. If you're a heavily regulated industry and you're making a ton of money in the industry, but you're making a ton of money because you're running twice the amount of hours you're allowed to run legally. That's a skeleton that can come out. So now you got to retool how that's getting done. It's going to hurt your profitability. Or it gives you the opportunity to frame the issue correctly, yes, or to frame how you're going to manage it and get in front of it. So first step, obviously address skeletons as much as you can all the time. Never let a stone go unturned.
By the way, it's going to get discovered.
Yes. It's going to get discovered.
During a due diligence process, this idea is really to identify it and then address it.
Yeah, and that's the 3 steps. 1 is you're always doing it. 2, do it before you even enter the sale or exit process. And 3, if you find them when you're going through the due diligence with your potential broker or lister or deal manager, they're going to bring them up and they're going to see them, and you got to address them quicker. Get rid of them, crush them, squash them, whatever you got to do. Fire them if you have to. If they're a person, address your skeletons in your closet. Address lawsuits, address issues that can derail the conversation. Because again, back to, like I said in prior episodes, is the continuity of the conversation. You want to talk about stopping continuity really quickly. Go through a good conversation with somebody, then all of a sudden they bring you something that your face blushes and puts you back in your seat. You lost all leverage. You have no strategy then, and you're being defensive. And these guys are sharks. Most of the time, these businesses are super sophisticated. If they're doing acquisitions, they're going to know they found an issue. And just like what I was talking about with the continuity pieces, as soon as they smell blood in the water, they're going to keep looking for more bait, and they're going to keep looking for more issues. And if it affects your EBITDA, it affects your dollar amount in the end.
Sure.
If you're in an industry, you're in internet and marketing and tech, there's some EBITDAs that are 10, 15. You've heard some numbers of upwards of 20 times EBITDA, potentially some really big cash outs. If you cost yourself $500,000 on a 10 times multiplier, you just cost yourself $5 million because of an issue that could have been averted or could have been saved. So how does EBITDA impact your exit valuation?
Great question. Real quick, just double click on your skeletons in the closet. Couple of things there. Number one, take a page out of our guest, was it episode 2 or 3, Dr. Matt Sowchik from the University of Florida, author of The H Factor. Be humble. Listen, I've been sued a number of times. Working with celebrities is one of the most bittersweet things you could ever do. I have been sued multiple times by idiots, you know who you are, that literally admitted that it was a shakedown. Hey, dude, you work with the Wayans family? Oh, you work with Kevin Hart? Here's we'll settle it for $250,000. And then, I don't know, maybe in a future episode, I'll be interested in talking about that. But be humble about it once the statute's over. That's true. There's probably non-disclosures associated with this. Good thing I didn't say anything specifically. But no, but the truth is be humble. Like, don't hide it is the point. As it relates to EBITDA, I've said this in previous episodes. I said it already today. And you could either like it or dislike it. The sooner you come to terms with the reality that the value of your business is based on the fundamentals of your business, measured by most buyers through an EBITDA calculation, the more you realize how important it is. And one other thing, Ed was mentioning earlier about this idea of paying yourself sort of a commensurate market rate. Don't be worried about that. And Ed, I actually learned a lot from you on this, because I think the types of businesses that you've rolled up into Button, you could add back some of those comps, particularly if you're going to phase out of the business. So imagine if you sold your business and never collected another paycheck. It's probably not a big deal. But in most instances, they're going to have you stay on for some period of time. So paying yourself a market rate or an aggressive salary, a reasonable salary though, gives you some leverage for how you negotiate whatever payment comes to you. Let's go ahead and transition to segment 2. We've already talked about getting your financial house in order, but even if your books are spotless, buyers don't just buy spreadsheets. They buy companies that operate without you. So let's head into segment 2, operational readiness, making the business scalable.
It's what everybody wants to have. They all want to buy it, and they all want to earn it. And that's why you go into business, is to make something that is scalable. People are either growing, selling, or dying in business. So you don't want to be the latter. You want to be the first two. And really focusing on 5 key points. Build your revenue engine so it's unstoppable. Diversify your revenue on as many customer accounts as you can. You don't want to be that business that goes to market and says, oh, hey, we have 1 great client or 10 great clients. Because what happens if you lose that client? You lost your business. Understanding your competitive nature through whether you use a SWOT analysis or some other method, understanding your strength, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. So the strengths should be your culture, what separates you from other businesses in your space. Weaknesses, try not to have any, but you're going to have some, and be humble about your weaknesses. And
but we don't have any weaknesses.
Yeah, we don't either. Looking at opportunities, a bunch of other opportunities out there within your business, ways to diversify revenue, and who's a threat to your business. And then removing the founder dependency. empowering the team to move your business forward, whether it be through operational bonuses, salaries, interest in the company. Like you said, you had 85% of your first business. I'm assuming some of your team had some of the interest that helped move forward. Bringing on a thoroughbred bean counter, CFO, controller, whatever you want to call them, somebody that's going to tell you where all of the money's going, where all the money's coming to, and where it's staying, and then document your process and procedures. You want to write the book on it. You want somebody to be able to come in, take your business over, own it, and literally just open up the book, follow the manual, and run the business. Starting with the last one in mind, how important are SOPs within your business when you're doing it, when you're growing a business?
Yeah. So, again, it's about that discipline, implementing discipline throughout your business so that it could run without you. And so that it's prepped for scalability. Standard operating procedures. Oh God, it's been over a decade where my business has adopted something from the deceased, unfortunately, entrepreneur Chet Holmes, who wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And he uses he calls it the 3 Ps. And that's what I've always adopted: planning, process, and policy. They're just everything to de-risking your business. The ability for consistency in operational excellence is the outcome. Not settling for some inefficient or ineffective operational tactic or strategy, but working as a team. This is in order to come up with your SOPs or your PPPs. It's absolutely a team process. I'm looking back. We're here in the offices of LSEO, my digital marketing company, and we've gone through this process several times. And every few years, we upgrade our PPPs. In this building, we have a conference center down on the first floor. And so what we'll do is we'll go down there and we'll do a training session on the importance of, for instance, how we provide client services. What's the ethos at LSEO for delivering client services? What's the standard by which we go about that? And so codifying all this into an SOP/PPP is super important. That's why it made it to one of my 20 tactics for M&A. You put that in place and you update it every few years.
Now, who's responsible to update it?
It's a great question. It depends on how large your organization is. I highly recommend that this is a team effort, and it usually you use like a leadership model, sort of top down. I certainly don't, even when we did our core values and our core purpose as a company, which very much kind of goes into this SOP concept, it was very collaborative. Yeah, I mean, maybe I made the final decisions, but I carefully took into consideration from a top down, my leadership team's endorsement, and then as it trickled down. So reoccurring revenue, I know that that's something that excites you. How does it increase value?
Yeah, so reoccurring revenue is, if you're not in a space where you're creating something new, or creating or solving a problem that's never been solved before. If you're more in a service business, service space, think of it as your allowance. So if you have 10 accounts that only call you when they need something, you're at their beck and call. So they're going to call you when they want to give you money.
By the way, buyers love MRR and ARR, monthly reoccurring revenue, annual reoccurring revenue. And those two metrics are more valuable than one-time revenue, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh. When it's a one-time revenue, you can't judge when it's going to come in. It might come in November, it might come in December, it might come in January, February, March. You don't know when it is. But when you can create your business to be more of a subscription model versus an as-needed model, now you have monthly reoccurring revenue, and subscription models drastically increase the longevity of customers. And all that does from an acquirer is, well, hey, if we take the founder out and we come in, we know we can count on that revenue to come every month with a smaller, say, attrition of accounts, maybe 1 or 2%, instead of, oh, hey, there's no contracts. There's no monthly recurring revenue. There's no annual recurring revenue. Maybe we'll buy the business and maybe we'll get that revenue for next year. Maybe it'll be 20% more. maybe it'll be 50% less. It builds a lot of risk into it. So if you have customer contracts, lots of customers, and lots of recurring revenue, it's a more durable, more valuable business. And that's where you kind of separate yourself from the pack. A lot of people in your industry might not be doing it. And the person to really drive in the recurring revenue most of the time is that founder idea, the founder logic. That also can hurt you. So why do people, when they're looking at businesses, sometimes avoid businesses that are founder reliant?
Yeah, we've talked about this in previous episodes. And a lot of what we're covering here, like if you check, there's 20 items on the checklist. If you check 15, you're probably going to have a successful exit. But I'd rather, as at least it relates to this episode, focus on readiness and discipline, and also the fact that, you want to build your company so that it could function without you. The company shouldn't be so reliant on you that it can't run for several months without you. God forbid, what if something happens to your health or something happens to your immediate family? God, I don't even want to go there. But you're going to need some time off. And so you want to put together your own checklist if you're sort of founder dependent, your business, for how to disassociate from that. We're going to talk about that in future episodes. It's super important. Know that it's an item on that M&A checklist. If you're that guy or that gal, you need a strategy to remove yourself so the company could continue to roll. You mentioned in the introduction the importance of hiring that sort of financial ninja. Can you just touch on that before we enter the next part of our episode?
Yeah. So whether you call it a controller, CFO, I don't care about the title. You don't need to have that title in your book. CFOs, in my experience, is the most loosely used title in business. When you actually meet a CFO, you'll know when you meet a CFO, because they are very, very high level, very strategic. They are very good planners. I'd go out on a limb and say 80+% of CFOs you meet aren't CFOs. They're a controller that's been a controller for a long time in their company and said, "Oh, we'll make you a CFO now." Titles aside, you don't need either one of them. You just need somebody responsible to make sure you count everything, whether it's a senior accountant, whether it is a controller, whether it is a CFO, and it's somebody that's trusted. You have to have somebody who knows where all the skeletons are in the closet, if there are any, and really keeps track of everything day in, day out from a financial standpoint. That's going to help you go through the process of selling your business.
And before you close out the segment, I want to just make a point. The reason why this is on my checklist is because, on the one hand, I challenge all entrepreneurs to build a A+ financial acumen. But that doesn't make it your responsibility. The big money is going to come back to you in strategic things, strategic vision, strategically thinking through how to make your products better, strategically thinking about how to hire the top talent. There's just not enough hours in the day. So you need to hire someone who, is an equal, or someone who even has a stronger acumen around finance. I've been in so many companies where you have three people. One's the CEO, the other's the president, the other's the controller or the CFO. I mean, it doesn't necessarily make sense. So it's, one of my colleagues used to say, "Kris, you give out the title too much. Stop doing that, because it makes it harder for them, the people that are actually doing the day-to-day work, to really build a great organization. First, you need to develop an A+ acumen, and then you need to have a right-hand person that is available to you 24/7 to do all kinds of things related to financial matters."
So yeah, transition to segment 3. Operational scalability is key, but it is not enough to just be well run. You also have to make your company attractive to really anybody who wants to buy it. And that's when strategic positioning comes in. Let's dive into segment 3, strategic positioning, how to attract more buyers.
So segment 3, how to attract more buyers. Now, at the end of the day, if you want to remember how we've talked about earlier today in previous episodes, the fact that it's usually a mathematical formula that's used. It's a multiplier. It's usually pulled from your industry averages. If you want to get towards the higher end of that, you need to build FOMO. You need to build a sense of competition. And so at Legacy Advisors, that's one of our core values that we give to our clients, is the strategy of bringing multiple buyers to the table. But here are some of the things to keep in mind as we ask each other some questions on this topic. If you're thinking about going to market and you want to bring as many buyers to the table as possible, build brand visibility through leadership. I'm hoping to get an opportunity to talk more about that. Identify strategic and financial buyers early. Guess what? On my list are my competitors, always. They're frenemies is what they are, and they should be for you too. Clean up your AR and your working capital issues. That made it to my checklist because of I think it was a $2.3 million receivable that I basically got pennies on when I sold my first company. And so I'm very sensitive to this idea of aging and how we think about revenue. I'm also really sensitive to the idea of accrual versus cash basis financial reporting, which we could talk about in a future episode, not for today. Quickly eliminating distractions, bad products, bad hires. Put the dead dogs to bed. Invest in visible, scalable growth. So my first question for you is, how does visibility attract better buyers?
Visibility in your business primarily is industry specific. Most of the time, the public isn't going to be buying your business. But the same marketing you put into your public is the same marketing your competitors see. So like you said, you start with your business, you start your business and you continue to manage and maintain your competitors as potential buyers down the road. When competitors see this great presentation, and they could be a lot larger. I mean, Microsoft buying a smaller business or a large energy producer buying a smaller energy producer. If they hear about your brand, they hear about what you're doing and you're creating noise in the industry, it's going to drag them to the deal. It's going to help you better position yourself to really deliver what they've been seeing for so long. And once they get to that level, to really get into seeing what you're doing and understanding how you're doing it, hopefully it gets it across the line. Hopefully it gets you finished up because, again, the people you're competing with could be your next buyer. And they're doing the same thing you are. They're in your business. There's a lot of stuff they're already getting over with. So make sure you're very loud, not with the sale piece, but loud with your brand, proud of your brand. If you're not excited about it, no buyers are going to be excited about it.
But before you ask me a question, I think there's a ton of little hacks that people could do. First, when was the last time your business put out a press release on a new product, an upgrade to your service? When was the last time you either hired a PR agency or created one within your organization to muster up some buzz? You didn't say it, which is ironic because when you and I were rehearsing a couple of days ago, you mentioned when I said, hey, I'm going to ask you about visibility, you said FOMO, fear of missing out. If you think about it, the reason why the competitors are always a really good target to be on your target list is because those are the ones that care most about you beating them, and you developing more buzz. And so, like I said, there's a whole range of things you could do. I also believe that thought leadership, and I get it, we're from different industries where, in the tech space, it really candidly is about the shiny object. When innovation happens, it's almost irrelevant who did it first. It's all about execution and who could attract the most, technically, who could create the best viral loop and really create the largest growth factor to their user acquisition. But that's for nothing other than you've got to put yourself out there, at least in my space, in the tech space. I'm from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. At the time that I sold Pepper Jam, there were the three major players were all publicly traded companies. It was Google. They owned a company called Performix. It was ValueClick, which is a standalone publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. And then it was Linkshare, which was owned by Rakuten, which is probably a $50 to $100 billion company. And here we are in little old Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, with this Kris Jones, who is a visionary. Think big, dress in black, be confident. We're the next fill in the blank. And sure enough, Michael Rubin from GSI Commerce was basically like, why do I keep hearing about you guys? So every investment, Ed, that I've ever made, it's a rinse and repeat. How can we get you in the story when something is published on your industry? How do we make you one of the resources for the top writers and publishers and editors across all of the news media? One of the reasons, and again, I play at a fairly small level because I'm here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, but maybe at the highest level of anyone that I know as it relates to national and global publicity. How the heck in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, do you become business partners with the type of people? What you do is you create, and I agree, I love that you said, not on the sales side. This is authentic. It's about putting yourself out there. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being a thought leader.
And being a steward of your industry.
And being a steward of your industry and a problem solver in your industry.
So when you're getting ready to go through this process and go to market, how do you identify and eliminate the dead weight within your company?
So yeah, I referenced it earlier, dead dogs. I actually think this is one of the most fun parts of this M&A checklist concept. It gives us an invitation to address the hard things. There's there's books in this office called The Hard Thing About Doing Hard Things, right? I am proposing that as a responsibility of a operationally minded entrepreneur, that we're always looking for opportunities to give things the best possible chance we could give them, but not forever. And you need to be comfortable with this process of supporting new lines of business, supporting new employees, supporting new marketing strategies, supporting a bunch of things. But when they are not working, you need to be the one to say, you know what? It's got to be part of your ethos. For folks that are listening, or if you've been so brave to be listening to legacy advisors, you're probably going to be in a pretty good position when your opportunity comes knocking, particularly if you take into consideration some of these. But put the dead dogs to bed and the skeletons thing, I mean, I use those metaphors to play around a little bit, but they're two of the most important ones. And I think, I've gotten a ton of feedback from people on this content, and these little metaphors really empower us.
Well, it makes you remember it too.
Makes you remember it, and it empowers us. The hard thing about doing hard things. So this is a tough question. Should founders continue to invest in growth pre-exit? I mean, I can't even imagine that the answer would be no.
It isn't. And it depends on the investment level. So let me back up there. You want to execute your strategic plans as if you're not selling, because you might not be selling. You might go through the whole process.
Great point.
And you might want the emotional seller that might not be completely ready to sell yet, who says, I'm going to put this out there. If I get 50 million, I'll sell. Well, 40 million is not going to cut it. You might go through the whole process and never sell. So you don't want to affect your business in any way, shape, or form going through this process. If selling doesn't work out, or the exit doesn't work out, unless it's a guaranteed strategy of, hey, I'm transitioning the business to the next generation, or I'm transitioning the business to an employee-owned type of setup, or an MBO, whatever it might be, which they're not all guaranteed either. There could be issues with financing, or heck, you could transition it to the next generation, and 2 years later, they might say, this sucks, I'm leaving, and you got to run your business again. Always run your business as if you're never selling. So maintain your assets, maintain your relationships, maintain your employees, your good employees, the ones that aren't getting put to bed, and maintain your revenue growth, and maintain your strategy to deliver your budgets. You should never just stop, because now it took you how many years to get your flywheel moving, to get your whole business going forward. Now you're going to stop to sell the business. Business doesn't sell. What do you got to do? You're going to shut the door and go home? You got to get it moving again. You got to wind everything back up. So now you got to jump. And you want to talk about an emotional nightmare or a mental nightmare? That is the hardest thing ever. To where you've checked out, you're guaranteed, you're winning the lottery in your head. You're spending the money, and you're saying, oh, I'm going to pay off all this debt. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it doesn't come out. Or I'm going to put this much money here. It doesn't work out. Buyer doesn't work out, or something falls apart with your diligence. Now you have to restart again. So don't change anything on your day-to-day. Run your business as if it's not even happening. forget about it even happening. Let what I would always recommend is let somebody else handle it, like what we do with deal management or a brokerage service, whatever it might be. Let somebody else handle that noise, and that's super key, because if you have to come back into it, you got to come back into it. And when you're continually running your business, there's other issues that will come up that you can notice that you could address earlier.
The reason why focusing on your growth factor is on the M&A checklist is that, again, in my space, companies grow really quick. So your pro forma, your financial projections are actually a huge, huge factor in valuation. We'll usually get, because a lot of tech companies have only been around for a few years, they'll often value you based on your last 12 and your projected 12, or your last 24 and your projected 24. So you have a ton of flexibility within the tech space to put together aggressive growth strategies. Reid Hoffman wrote a book called Blitzscaling, which is a good book for anybody to check out when you're really trying to think through how do you ramp up your growth factor. Because think about it. Say if you're a $50 million business and you're doubling every 12 months, you're not going to get valued on your $50 million. You're going to get valued on somewhere in between the 50 and the 100 million, hopefully closer to the 100 million. Your earnout's probably going to come from the 100 million.
Question about different issues in businesses. How do AR issues impact your deal value?
I shared the story, of this $2.3 million in receivables that I had. And the buyer called me in and said, Kris, have you looked at the aging of your receivables? And now, again, this was my first exit. So I was like, why? What do you want to show me? He's like, well, look at how much of this 2.3 million is post 90. And it was a good portion. And he said, how much of that do you think is going to come in? And so you just don't want to put yourself in this situation. And in full disclosure, that wasn't something that I had anticipated. I wish I would have. The next times that I had been in that situation, I have anticipated it. For the companies that I have invested in, I have coached those entrepreneurs to make sure that they control how they receive cash. Cash is king. Cash is the lifeblood of growth. And it becomes very, very difficult because if your growth factor grows so much, you could run out of money. And I won't share the story now, but that actually almost happened. Not quite, at Pepper Jam. And I could share the story at a later date of how I was saved. So finally in this segment, why build buyer relationship years ahead? This target list that I think is like everything. Every entrepreneur needs at least 5 to 8 logical potential acquirers. And it's something you could write down on a piece of paper and put it in your pocket or put it in your notes on your phone. But why do you think that's important?
It's getting to know the players in the space, and you're going to be able to track them, and people are going to come on the list and come off the list. You're going to say you start out with 10 companies that, hey, once I get to a certain level, I'm going to sell, or once I get to here, I sell, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, one of those people on your list sells. Oh, wait, okay, I read that one a little wrong. They were selling, they weren't buying. Or this person over here acquires somebody larger than them. Now they just moved up. Always understanding, it's like knowing your enemy and frenemy. Yep. So it's a frenemy of how you're going to navigate and how you're going to mentally prepare of who you're talking to. Because there might be some people that you don't want on that list. You run into X, Y, and Z company all the time, and you're taking customers off them left and right. And every time a customer comes over, they have nothing but bad mouthing those people. They have tons of employees leaving. They have tons of employees coming and going. Maybe they have a culture issue. Do you want to move your company over to that company that could have a culture issue when you're not? I mean, most of the time, you're not going to buy an island. You're going to be around. You're going to be around these people. You're going to see these people. You're going to see them at bars, restaurants, whatever it is in the local region. And now you have to live with the person that you potentially sold to being a terrible steward of the business you sold to them. So managing those names and having a picture in your head of who they are, what they are and how they outward reflect on their business, on their clients and their employees is a big deal on how you rank them on who you prefer to sell to. Obviously, in the end, it's the money piece, who pays the most, but managing the players in the market, the ins, the outs, all that stuff is really important on who could be your potential suitor. And it helps you mentally prepare for it too. Hey, will my trucks look good in that color or whatever it might be?
Yeah, visualize. Absolutely. Awesome. So positioning yourself for a premium deal is what we're talking about. It's huge. But the best founders, they don't stop there. They also keep their options wide open, or what I like to call optionality. And that's what we're going to focus on in the next segment, maximizing optionality, playing chess, not checkers.
There's not a recipe online on how to do these things, aside for your M&A guide there. That actually is online if you guys want to download it. There's a lot of paths to achieving what you want to achieve in business and how you get what you want to get out of the exit or the transition, whatever it is. And it doesn't always happen the same way. And you can really look at every option out there. And that's what developing a team around you, developing some advisors that are very close, that are quiet, make sure they're quiet about things, make sure you could trust to talk to them, and kind of testing the waters. Hey, how do I do this? How do I strategize this? How do I have my A opportunity, my B opportunity, my C opportunity to make sure one of the opportunities works out? And there's been times that I've been in where A, B, and C didn't work out, and I had to find a D opportunity. And some of the key points in this section is exploring alternatives, making sure you have those other options in place, whether it be full share sale, partial sale, ESOP, MBO, maybe it's a complete earnout or a partial sale, whatever it might be. While you're going through that and you're going through your business and you're running your business, you might not need to call them a CEO, but you should have in your mind who could be that person if you leave.
Yeah, by the way, I think hiring a president is how I've always done it, is one of the smartest things you could do if you have multiple businesses. But continue.
Yeah, and having that person that, because it looks really well to a buyer when you sit down at a table with them and say, well, what happens when you leave? We're going to transition this over 6 months, Kris. What happens when you leave? Oh, well, when I leave, I've already been training John Smith over here to be my successor. He knows everything I know, and within 6 months, I could transition myself out and I could transition him in. You just solved the problem for the buyer. So the other thing is focus on leverage, not desperation. You always want to position yourself and negotiate from a position of leverage. The second you get to desperation, it's a fire sale. Like I said, with blood in the water, the sharks are going to smell it and they're going to take advantage of it. They're in business for a reason, and that's to make money. And sometimes they make more money when you make less money. So if you get desperate, hey, I'll take whatever you give me, or we don't really need a 5-year earnout. We can do a 4-year earnout, or whatever it might be, whatever it is. If you get desperate, you lose leverage. And then building a company that has multiple strategies of how you make revenue, how you grow, how you prosper, because that builds a more durable business. So starting off with a couple questions here. How does, and you might not call him a CEO, you might call him whatever you want to call him, somebody that could be that person. How does hiring a CEO add value to your business?
So the reason why this is on the checklist is because, first, there are different levels of skills and experience required when you're building from 0 to $1 million, million to 5 million, 25 to 50 million, 100 million plus. The experiences of the necessary leader might not be what you have. What you often see is you see guys like me and guys like you, although it's a little bit different, move to a founder title because it gives us a lot of flexibility. Because we have lots going on. What are we going to try to make it seem like we don't rely on a lot of people? So I just think it's a strategic consideration. So when you look at this M&A checklist and you're going over each one and you're testing it in your head, listen, you're not going to get paid more if you're Superman. You're going to get paid more if your business is set up for success and if it's making more money. So at the end of the day, I think that, again, Matt Sauchik, humility, the H factor, come on now. If we could align on this idea that entrepreneurship creates this extraordinary opportunity to have immense social impact, extraordinary community involvement and impact, as well as the ability to create multi-generational wealth for your family and your loved ones, and your legacy, then let's take a little bit of humble pie here and strongly consider the idea of beefing up, your senior team. You aren't going to win any extra awards, and you're not going to get an extra $500,000 or $5 million because you're fucking Superman. So that's why I have it on the list. I want founders to ego down, be a little bit humble. Especially if this is your first rodeo, it's okay to have help. And if you think strategically like a buyer, the buyer is going to feel a lot better that you moved your role to founder and you brought in someone like Kris Nash, is a guy that I brought into LSEO 6 or 7 years ago. He had been one of the founders of a company called allaboutdance.com, which he had sold. He was the number 2 or number 3 player in the country, and he sold it to the number 1. So he came in already, very wealthy and very experienced, and I put him in charge. I also put him in charge of one of my other businesses, Refer Local. So anyway, that's why it's on my list. So you mentioned this is about optionality, and let's put aside, we're not going to sell, but we're going to take some chips off the table. So why should people consider that? Things like minority recap.
Thinking about the problems you want to solve. What boxes are you trying to check through this process? Is it, hey, I've had enough? Now I've been an exit ready CEO or founder, whatever it might be, and I've had enough and I'm just ready to exit. Okay. You're ready to exit. How do you want to exit? Are you okay exiting? You're always that person, always that busy person running 100 miles an hour.
But remember, this is about optionality. So it's not even strategic. At the end of the day, if the buyer walks and you still have this huge vision for creating wealth and building the best company in the world, you want to have your options open. Right?
Yeah. And making sure you're okay with the outcomes, having the opportunity to where if an initial full part sale falls through, if that's your goals, having it to where, okay, let me backpedal a little bit. And I like the person buying the business. I like the person or the company that's going to acquire it. I think our businesses together, you agree with the outcome, are going to be bigger and more valuable. Having the optionality to say, okay, I'm going to take some chips off the table, a couple $1 million, whatever it is, take some chips off the table, and I'm going to let some ride. That second bite at the apple can be more valuable than the first bite at the apple, especially if the people you're partnering with have aspirations as large as yours or bigger, potentially IPO or whatever it might be, to where you always hear the stories of Snapchat or any type of large IPO companies that IPO that their founders went from worth a couple $100,000 to worth a couple billion as soon as it IPO'd, because they IPO'd for twice the amount that they expected to. And always be open to those options. Always be open to work through the sale process. It's a process. It's called a process for a reason. You're not going into McDonald's and buying a cheeseburger. You're selling a business. There's a lot of process to it. And with the optionality and understanding, could be a full sale, chips off the table, second bite at the apple type of thing. How does optionality give founders negotiation leverage?
So I think one thing it does is it ratchets down the emotional sort of thermometer. When you ask the first significant other to go out on a date, if you knew that the girl down the street's been in love with you, you go in with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more swag. Just like Jackson, I think we mentioned earlier in a previous episode, my 13-year-old just sharing with me, hey, Daddy, turns out that, pretty much, when you're optimistic and you're positive and you're well prepared, you have options, to be happy instead of focusing on the thing that's sad. So I think it ratchets down the emotional thermometer. Listen, when you're going through the process, you get your LOI, but an LOI by structure is sort of a paraphrase. It's an outline, and there are certain negotiations that take place. Whatever was in that LOI might be your best option, but if the buyer starts to balk, or if something goes wrong, they want to push more of the money to an earnout or something like that. If you know that you could go and get mezzanine financing is typically done when you're in a transition, and you need growth capital is like one way of getting it. So you could pull out of the process if you've already identified some mezzanine lenders. That's just one example. If you can, let's just say hypothetically you're selling to one of your competitors. And once you go into due diligence, you realize that this isn't going to be a fit. Like, I don't want to work for these people. But guess what? You've done your homework, you've got your options, and you know that private equity is very active in your space. Unfortunately, you wanted to leave within a year or two, and most of the time private equity is going to keep you around possibly a little bit longer. And so, but you have options. So at the end of the day, that's the big deal. Final question, quick answer. What happens when you only have one way out?
You're screwed.
Yeah, you really are.
You really are. You backed yourself into a corner.
You end up never forgetting the deal that went wrong.
And I can't even think of me only having one way out, because I've been in so many positions. There's so many opportunities. There's so many ways to solve a problem. I'm sure you've never been into a place where it's like, oh crap, I'm backed into a corner. Because having only one way out to me just blows my mind. And it's not that they really only have one way out. It's that they didn't think of the other ways out. There is always options. There's always another path to take. There's another door to open. And when you feel like more often than not, people feel like they only have one way out. It's not true. So when you get in that mindset, if you only have one way out, you have no leverage, you have no confidence in the deal, and you are just taking whatever hand you're dealt, and it's going to be less money than you want. It's not going to be the deal you want. It's going to be less comfortable, and you're going to be in the wind, and you're going to be blown in the wind. To wrap all that up is, don't ever let yourself get in that mindset of one way out. Multiple ways out. Always look for the next door. So when you're stuck in the one way out mindset, you have to change it. You have to figure out how to fix that. The most important element of everything you're doing in this checklist is mindset. Because no matter how perfect your books are, your team is, or your growth story, if you walk into a deal with the wrong mindset, you will never maximize your outcome. Let's head into segment 5. Mindset for an exit. You deserve to win.
So, segment 5, mindset for the exit. You deserve to win. I mean, this is psychology. This is what I studied at Penn State. It's what I studied at Villanova for graduate school. Getting your head right will lead to success that people that know you the best will be surprised. They'll be like, holy cow, you have been able to accomplish so much. How do you do it? Because the secret is that you've got your mindset right. For my M&A checklist, I decided to add a number of items to this because I think it's so important to achieving a successful outcome. Here are some of the key points, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper in this final segment. I mean, I feel a little bit sappy, but I'm gonna fight through it. Listen, man, at the end of the day, success, big outcomes come to those who think big. Developing a mindset where you think about extraordinary possibility in your ability to make a difference in this world, solve problems, and to do amazing things, that will lead to a win more often than not. You also need to be mentally prepared for that roller coaster that we all go through. Everybody goes through it. So you got to be better prepared. And it's about owning your own legacy, not just your balance sheet. I mean, wouldn't it be kind of cool that if you sold your business, they'd be like, wow, that was a great company. And man, Ed Button Jr., man, he's a visionary entrepreneur. That's someone who inspired a lot of his people, got a lot of people who believed in him. I think I might have talked about this in the past, but one of my greatest accomplishments ever, or actually, I don't know if it's an accomplishment as much as my pride. It's something you just kind of don't necessarily say publicly, but it's in your heart, is how many of my early pepper jammers have gone on to do extraordinary things. CMOs of large companies, building their own businesses, many of them, of course, because I like to inspire people. It's funny. It's like my executives would say, hey, Kris, if you keep rah, everybody's going to leave and just go start their own business. But anyway, my point is I'm super proud of those people. So own your legacy, not just the finance part of it. Do it right. And then inspire confidence in buyers through mindset. Going into the deal with a level head and a good group of advisors and team members will make all of the difference. And at the end of the day, just like being a mom or a dad, sometimes we can't crack because the kids are around, so you are that constant, that visionary needs to shine. You can't lack in those characteristics because it could turn off a buyer. So my first question to you is, because you've asked me in the past, like how I do it. And I told you about the Tony Robbins conferences, but how do founders prepare mentally for selling in the sort of Ed Button Jr., world?
Yeah, it's tough. Super good question, because you're preparing for the unknown. So it's really a lot of preparation that you've done throughout your years of running your business. This is different. You're going to carry some of that over. You're going to carry that durability over. But to really prepare for it is the way I would go about it, and the way I've gone about it is research. Look around. Don't just look at the headlines. Don't look at, XYZ company bought this company, because all you're going to see is the outcome. You don't know what timelines got into it. You don't know what negotiations have gone into that. So actually look at some deals and look at timelines and talk to different people and understand that this isn't a sprint. This might take a year to get told no or to not get a deal done. It might take another year to get told no or not get a deal done. But it might be something in your case where you have a really sought after business that might take 4 weeks, and it might go super quick. It's in a roller coaster. It's take your time, check out when you have to, focus on your health. Whatever you do every day, stay in that routine. Whether it's you wake up and you work out, whether it's you go for walks, whatever it is, stay in that routine and just be ready for one hell of a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to invest in your mental health.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, it's super important. It's the only way you're getting done. If you don't want to do it, nobody's going to do it for you. So, Kris, why is dreaming big so critical during an exit?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know exactly why, but I know it's true. There are a lot of things that will derail us in life. The way that I think about it is opportunities come to everybody, but developing the ability to seize those opportunities is critical. Opportunity met with preparation equals success. I think that's what it is. But I mean, I grew up poor too. So it's like, how the heck, when did I start thinking big? Because people that know me personally are like, man, that guy has got, big ideas. All I could say is that it helps you get closer to your outcome. I'm really big on the idea of goal setting and always here. I think one of our previous episodes was on how I use the rapid planning method for my time management. It empowers me to focus on the things I care most about. Now take those things and use big thinking to do it. And so there are exercises that I go through with some of the founders that I've invested in. One example would be, and usually one of the early meetings when I'm feeling them out, I'm looking to draw this conclusion. This individual or these individuals will be successful with or without me. If I could conclude that they will be successful, I know I'm an amplifier. And part of the reason I'm an amplifier is because I help them think big. So what I do to them is I'll say, and just play along here. So, hey, Jimmy, what do you think you could sell? What do you think you could sell your block company for?
$25 million.
$50 million.
Yeah. I wish.
Well, what would you rather? Would you rather 50% of 100 million, or would you rather 10% of $1 billion? Huh?
Yeah.
So I try to help them realizing, and I remember, not I remember, but one of the most powerful lessons I ever learned was from a good friend of mine who was the CEO of a casino. And I just remember him saying, Kris, it's only just a couple more zeros. When I told him, you manage a multi-billion-dollar company, I'm here, and he would say, nah, you got it all, dude. Just a couple more zeros. The ability to think big is one of my shticks. It's one of the things that I think differentiates me. I only tell the story of growing up poor and all this stuff to really just welcome other people who feel that for whatever the reason, they had a bad lot. And I want to convince them that the future is within their hands. So for me, I don't actually know, but like thinking big might be my number one item on the checklist. All right. So how does your energy influence buyer perception? And I think this ties into your culture piece that you talked about previously, but how does that influence buyer perception?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to a fundamental belief I have is you choose, you don't hope. So if you are choosing to do anything in life, if you're choosing to be rich, you choose to be rich. If you're choosing to be poor, you're choosing to be poor. It's all your choice. So if you're choosing to sell your business, be energetic about it and be excited. And when you're excited about your business, it's going to help buyers be excited about your business. They don't want to come in and say, hey, Kris, I want to come see your business. Yeah, come on over. What's that going to get them? Nothing. Oh yeah, come on over. Let's talk about it. I want to show you what we're doing here. Here's a nice NDA. Let's sign this. We'll get together. We'll talk about it some more. And the buyer said, wow, these guys are real excited about this thing. Like, well, what are they doing? The chef doesn't come out and say, hey, here's the food. It sucks. They come out and say, here's this pan-seared filet with and they give you, they sell you first on it.
Interesting. I'm only thinking of this right now, but become a good storyteller.
Yep.
Captivate.
Yeah.
The buyer.
And if you're excited about it, you're going to solve half the problem there. You're going to get them excited about it. And getting them excited about it will get them into the next step and get the whole process started.
And by the way, I think that a better word than energy would be confidence.
Yep.
Just be confident. Be confident that the combined companies is, 1 + 1 = 3,
yep.
And that there's synergies that are going to get unlocked and tap into that storytelling around those synergies. Take an interest in how the combined companies are going to somehow unlock something super cool about both companies.
Oh, exactly. Last question for you is, why isn't it greedy to plan a big exit?
That's a stupid question. I wrote it.
You're allowed to say that.
I don't know. This is weird. You and I have talked about this. This is the entrepreneurial dream, dude. Shark Tank is in its freaking 30th season. What is a better explanation of the true essence of the American dream than entrepreneurship? Candidly, and I'm not getting into politics, but candidly, I think the bigger the exit, the more social impact, the more economic impact you're going to have on your family, on your community, on the causes that you care about the most. The bigger, the fucking better. And I don't mean that from the point of view of how flashy all my stuff is. It's about leveraging the American dream to motivate, inspire, and to create impact.
And it gives you options to do whatever you need to do.
It gives you options to do whatever you need to do. It allows me, it opens doors. And that's one of the things that is probably not talked about enough. I remember, I'll share a quick story. When I was in graduate school at Villanova, I was the president of the Graduate Student Council. And as such, when speakers would come to the school, on occasion, they would choose some of the student leadership to greet those people. Guess who came to school? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and who's our current Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think. And what was interesting was that I had gotten to Villanova after Penn State, and at Penn State, I had the extraordinary opportunity to meet Elie Wiesel. And I asked Elie the question before I asked it to RFK Jr. I said, listen, I'm a young kid, but I'm really motivated. I really want to make a difference in this world. And I'll share what Ellie said. Ellie said, Kris, find something that you care about with all your passion and just dedicate your life's purpose to it. And I was like, whoa, that's deep. All right. But that's not the point. The RFK Jr. one is the point. So I had an opportunity right before RFK went up to speak. I actually introduced him, but I was in like a green room area of the room. And I said, hey man, I'm just a young kid. Yeah, I want to make a difference in this world. How do I do it? And what he said to me was, and it's weird. It still doesn't settle well with me, but he was kind of right. He said, accomplishment, accomplishment, accomplishment. What I could tell you, Ed Button Jr.
You're going to call me ERB now.
ERB?
Like RFK.
What I could tell you is that my achievements, particularly exiting when I was literally 30 years old to a publicly traded company, has opened so many doors. It's given me so much leverage. It's given me such a gift to be able to do things and help people. So let's just do a final wrap up here of the episode. We hope that you enjoyed today's M&A checklist. Like I said earlier, you could download the full version of it without all of Ed and my commentary on our website, legacyadvisors.io. And remember a few things. Great exits aren't won at the negotiating table. They're won months, even years before you even think about selling.
If you take one thing away today, it is preparation isn't optional if you want a premium outcome. Exit-ready businesses sell faster for more money and less drama.
If you found today's episode valuable, and I just have a hunch that you do, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your preference is, and also leave us a review. And if you know a founder who needs to hear this, send this podcast to them. We'll see you on next week's episode of the Legacy Advisors podcast. Thanks for listening.